The news hit like a thunderclap across the shipping world. China has just launched a brand new maritime route, and it changes everything. A Chinese container ship left port, sailed across the Arctic, and arrived in the United Kingdom in just 18 days. That's nearly a third faster than the traditional route through the Suez Canal. And this isn't a one-time stunt. It's the official opening of a new artery of global trade. On the surface, it looks like another shipping story, a milestone for logistics. But dig deeper, and you'll see why Washington is worried. This route bypasses every chokehold the United States and its allies have relied on for decades to maintain control over global commerce. For China, it's more than just speed, it's a declaration of independence. And if the predictions come true, this route could reshape the balance of power in global trade for decades to come. But how did we get here? Why does this single new lane of shipping strike fear into America's geopolitical strategy? And what hidden consequences could it unleash on the global order? Let's break down the shocking rise of China's Arctic Express. For centuries, trade between Asia and Europe relied on a few narrow passageways, maritime choke points that shaped not just commerce, but the very politics of the modern world. The first and most famous is the Suez Canal, opened in 1869. Before it, ships traveling from Europe to Asia had to loop around Africa, a journey that could take months. The Suez shortened that voyage dramatically, transforming global trade. By the 20th century, the canal became the beating heart of Europe-Asia shipping. More than half of all goods flowing between the continents passed through this narrow 120-mile strip of water in Egypt. Then there's the Strait of Malacca, sandwiched between Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. It's one of the busiest waterways on Earth, where massive oil tankers and cargo ships pass daily. For Asian giants like China, Japan, and South Korea, this strait isn't just important, it's a lifeline. Roughly 60% of Middle Eastern oil destined for Asia squeezes through this passage. Whoever controls Malacca, in a sense, holds the choke on Asia's energy supply. Next comes the Panama Canal, connecting the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans across Central America. It's not as central for Asia-Europe trade, but it's vital for global shipping. Before it opened in 1914, ships sailing from New York to San Francisco had to endure the terrifying waters of Cape Horn at South America's southern tip, a journey that could take months. The Panama Canal cut that down to about 2 weeks, revolutionizing transoceanic commerce. And finally, the Cape of Good Hope route, circling the southern tip of Africa. This is the long detour, expensive, slow, but sometimes unavoidable. In 2021, when the mega container ship Ever Given got stuck in the Suez Canal and blocked traffic for days, hundreds of ships had no choice but to reroute via the Cape, adding thousands of miles and millions in costs. For China, a country that has become the factory of the world, these three arteries are indispensable. Nearly all of its manufactured goods heading west, and much of its oil and raw materials heading east, rely on them. But that reliance has always come with a risk. Because while China builds and sells the products, other nations control the gates. Here's the danger. These traditional routes lie in regions influenced, or outright dominated, by Western powers and their allies. The Suez Canal has been a flashpoint for geopolitical crises, from wars in the Middle East to piracy off the Somali coast. A blockade there could choke China's exports overnight. The Strait of Malacca is patrolled heavily by the U.S. Navy and its allies. Chinese leaders have long referred to this vulnerability as the Malacca Dilemma, the fear that one day American ships could cut off China's oil supply in a time of conflict. The Panama Canal, though in Panama, has always been under strong U.S. influence. Even when Panama assumed full control in 1999, Washington's presence never really went away. The U.S. has repeatedly signaled its willingness to defend or even reassert dominance over the canal in the name of global security. For Beijing, these realities highlight a grim truth. If another country can close your trade routes, then they can close your future. So for years, China has been quietly searching for alternatives. On September 20th, 2025, a container ship departed from Ningbo port in China, made quick stops in Qingdao and Shanghai, and then did something extraordinary. Instead of sailing through Malacca, Suez, or Panama, it charted a course straight north, cutting across the Arctic Ocean. 18 days later, it docked in Felixstowe, United Kingdom, the UK's largest container port. From there, it continued on to Rotterdam in the Netherlands, Hamburg in Germany, and Gdansk in Poland. This wasn't a trial. It was the official launch of the China-Europe Arctic Express. For years, the route had been in development. China partnered with Russia to solve practical issues: icebreaker escorts, Arctic navigation technology, and port infrastructure. The two nations worked under the framework of a China-Russia Arctic Route Development Subcommittee, and by mid-2025, the groundwork was ready. Now, the results are in. The Arctic shortcut slashes nearly 30% off the traditional Suez Canal route. Instead of 12,800 nautical miles, ships travel just 8,000 to 8,900. Instead of nearly a month at sea, the trip takes just 18 days. And unlike the choke points of old, this route bypasses you. This is where the story gets political. Over the last decade, Washington has repeatedly raised alarms about China's growing presence in global shipping. U.S. leaders have pressured Panama to scale back Chinese involvement in canal operations. In 2024, Donald Trump, back in the political spotlight, even suggested that America should consider retaking control of the Panama Canal, citing national security. More recently, Chinese ships have faced extra fees when entering American ports. The U.S. Trade Department hiked tonnage charges specifically for Chinese vessels, raising their operating costs on the Asia-North America route. The message was clear. America still holds levers it can pull, but the Arctic Express changes the game. For the first time, China has a direct Europe-bound maritime route that Washington can't touch. For exports, especially high-value goods like electronics, machinery, and green tech, the Arctic Express is both faster and safer. For imports, particularly energy, it's a strategic lifeline. Here's where the numbers get jaw-dropping. In 2025 alone, China imported 60 million tons of Russian crude oil and 26 million tons of natural gas via Arctic shipping lanes. That's nearly triple the volume of 2020. Already, the Arctic carries about 12% of all trade between China and Europe. Why does this matter? Because until now, China's energy lifelines ran through vulnerable bottlenecks. Oil tankers from the Middle East squeeze through the Strait of Malacca. LNG carriers often rely on Suez. Any conflict, blockade, or accident could cripple supplies. But with Arctic shipping, China taps directly into Russia's vast energy reserves, bypassing those risks. This is not just about economics, it's about survival. In a crisis scenario, Beijing knows it can't afford to have its oil imports cut off. The Arctic Express is a third strategic channel, a backup artery that keeps the heart of the Chinese economy beating, no matter what happens elsewhere. Of course, the Arctic Express is not without problems. The Arctic Ocean is honestly one of the harshest environments on Earth. Ice covers much of it for most of the year, and even in summer, drifting sea ice creates these dangerous, unpredictable navigation conditions. That's why, right now, the route is only reliably open from July to September. Even then, ships require constant icebreaker escorts. Infrastructure is another big issue. Russia's Far East really lacks modern, large-scale port facilities, rescue stations, and navigation systems. China and Russia have begun investing heavily, but it'll take years before the route can handle the same capacity as the Suez or Panama canals. And climate change, ironically, is both an enabler and a risk. On one hand, melting ice is making the Arctic more navigable. On the other, unpredictable storms and environmental concerns add new layers of uncertainty. So while the Arctic Express is groundbreaking, it's not yet ready to replace traditional routes. But let's look ahead. By the year 2050, scientists predict that the Arctic could see up to 6 months of ice-free navigation each year. If that happens, the Arctic Express won't just be a seasonal alternative. It could actually become the main highway of global trade. Picture a world where container ships routinely zip across the top of the globe, cutting weeks off travel times. A world where China, thanks to its early investments, dominates the infrastructure and logistics of Arctic trade. In that future, the strategic value of Suez, Panama, and Malacca could shrink. And with it, the geopolitical leverage that Western powers have wielded for more than a century. The race for the Arctic isn't just about shipping. It's about who controls the next great frontier of globalization. It's important to see the Arctic Express as part of a larger puzzle. China has been weaving a vast web of trade infrastructure, both by land and by sea. On the maritime side, it has signed 70 shipping agreements with 66 countries and regions. These deals ensure Chinese ships can dock, refuel, and move goods almost anywhere. On land, the China-Europe Railway Express has exploded in growth. Back in 2015, there were fewer than 50 routes. Today, there are 93 regular lines reaching 229 cities in 26 countries. Including seasonal and custom lines, the total exceeds 200. By June 2025, the railway had completed more than 110,000 trips, moving goods worth over $450 billion. At its peak, 184 trains departed in a single day. The trains can't replace shipping. Each one carries only a fraction of a container ship's load, and at much higher cost. But they provide redundancy, speed for urgent goods, and a powerful symbol. China doesn't rely on just one route, but many. In short, Beijing is building an entire network of alternatives, so that no single blockade, accident, or political move can hold its economy hostage. The China-Europe Arctic Express is more than a shipping route. It's a statement. It says, China will not be cornered. It will not let its future depend on waterways controlled by others. It will carve new paths, even through ice and storm, to secure its place in the world. For the United States, this is a wake-up call. For Europe, it raises both hope of faster trade and questions about dependence on Chinese logistics. For Russia, it cements its role as China's Arctic partner. And for the rest of the world, it signals that the map of global trade is shifting northward. So the next time you look at a globe, don't just trace the equator or the old colonial shipping lanes. Look up, to the frozen seas above. Because one day soon, the true highway of the global economy may run through the Arctic. And if that happens, one question will define the 21st century. Who really controls the top of the world?